The Blockchain Show is a podcast that demystifies cryptocurrencies and distributed ledger technology.
Hello, blockchain fans. Welcome back to The Blockchain Show. This is episode 150. I got a guest today, Ivo Georgiev from AdEx. Ivo, how are you doing today?
I'm doing fine, thank you.
Great to hear, and I appreciate you joining me today. I know this is the first time on the podcast, so please introduce yourself a little bit more to the audience, and then we'll talk about what you're doing with AdEx.
Sure. I'm Ivo, and I'm the CEO of AdEx. We started the project in 2016, late 2016, and it's all about making advertising better, protecting the privacy of the end users, and introducing transparency between publishers and advertisers.
That's great. So what was it about blockchain that brought you in and made you think that this is a technology that is good for your company?
So I should go further back in time and tell you a bit about when I started to use Bitcoin. So it was back in 2011, I think, and a very few companies were using it. And one of the companies that I was using to store files in place of Dropbox, so it was Dropbox alternative, it was called Vuala, was using Bitcoin. So at the time I was really impressed by the ability to send money without fuss, without having to interact with complicated banking applications or without having to interact with banks at all. And at the time, PayPal and a few others were the only things that were providing such an easy experience with money. But Bitcoin went one step further and allowed you to be your own bank. So this is what impressed me about blockchain. And it's pretty much the same story with AdEx. We need a way for advertisers to be able to pay publishers without being able to be censored by payment processors or without being taxed heavily either by the same payment processors or by other parties in between them. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Awesome, man. Hey, I really appreciate what you're working on because, doing podcasting, we dealt a little bit with advertisers is, it's a tricky situation. It's not easy to first of all make advertisements that people want to listen to, but even more difficult is to monetize advertisements and give something both to the creator and something to the seller, the advertiser, that is mutually beneficial. Just cutting out the middleman with the financial, all those institutions. I imagine that's going to help quite a bit to kind of streamline the process. And I know you mentioned that you've been going on, what was it, since 2016?
Yeah.
How has the advertising changed since you began?
Actually, I should say that it has changed for the better. And we're glad to see this happening. A lot of companies have started exploring privacy, mostly because of the GDPR and the California alternative of the GDPR. Those laws and legislations have actually driven the industry to try to clean itself. For example, there is this thing which we use called contextual advertising, which is basically trying to target based on the content of the page and not based on what you know about the user, which allows you to actually not know anything about the user. So it's great for privacy. And even Google have announced that they're integrating contextual advertising now. So yeah, I think it has changed for the better and it keeps changing for the better. There's also OpenRTB3, which employs a lot of cryptography. It's generally moving in the right direction. It's still mostly like there's a lot of malware, there's a lot of advertising fraud, and etc. But it's definitely moving for the better.
Awesome. Yeah, the internet is a weird place still. A lot of fraud out there. It kind of reminds me a little bit of the Brave browser and how they have the BAT token, the basic attention token. Is that similar to what you're working on, or what's the difference there?
Yeah, that's a very good question. First of all, it's similar, yes, but there are two key differences. One of them is that the basic attention token currently works. The BAT mechanism is generally focused on the Brave browser right now. I'm aware that it can expand beyond the Brave browser, but their general priority is to have it working in the Brave browser first. Meanwhile, we are absolutely generic, which means that any publisher could integrate AdEx, and then it doesn't matter what browser their audience is using. And the second difference is what we use for payments. In BAT, obviously the payment is in the BAT token. In our case, it's in DAI, which is pegged to the US dollar, which is helpful for both publishers and advertisers. The last difference that I want to point out is the philosophical difference, which is Brave currently rewards end users for their attention. Meanwhile, we are sticking with the more established economical models of advertisers paying publishers directly. There is a possibility in our protocol to integrate the ability for the user to outbid the advertiser, meaning that we can allow users to pay not to see ads. I'm not saying that our model is better or worse. It's just a different model.
Yeah, no, it sounds really cool, man. I like that ability to pay to get out of ads. You know, I was thinking about Netflix and how they don't have ads and how it can add so much more value without having that interruption. But at the same time, that money that you're spending is also going back into the content. So they're able to make a lot more programs for people to enjoy. So, a lot of people they don't want to pay for ads, but when you think about it, it's kind of like voting with your dollar. You can really choose to increase the quality of what you're viewing somebody can rather if they go that route.
Exactly. Yeah.
I know that you operate on the Ethereum blockchain and you're trying to create the largest payment channel network on Ethereum. I saw there was a Hacker Noon article about that. What was it that made you decide to choose Ethereum?
That's also a great question. So our model at its core is based on payment channels. And this is because every single payment for every impression is a separate micropayment. And this is really important for transparency. Because when you pay for each impression individually, then the payment data is also your reporting data. So by using a payment channel for this, which is a transparent, secure mechanism, then you're not only making payments transparent and secure, but you're also making reporting transparent and secure for all parties involved. And for doing payment channels, there is really a few options. You can use the Lightning Network on Bitcoin, but that had a few problems for us. The first one is that it doesn't operate with alternative tokens such as USDT. So we couldn't do stable payments on Lightning Network. And maybe that has changed now, but used to be an issue. And then the second issue is that it uses a hub and spoke model, which really isn't practical for what we're doing, because it requires constant rebalancing of channels. So we decided to build our own payment channel network. And Ethereum is really the best option for that because it's the most established chain after Bitcoin. And you could say the most stable chain after Bitcoin. But at the same time, it allows you a lot more flexibility in technical terms. So it's much easier to build payment channels, and it's much easier to build these layer 2 solutions.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I could see why you would go that route. It seems very, very useful. And I was reading about your beta testing, and it seemed like it was pretty successful. You're bringing on real publishers at this point. And then I saw something that you're even going outside of crypto. What did you mean by going outside of the crypto world?
Well, we have a bunch of publishers and advertisers which are related to streaming video and streaming music online. So this is the branching out that you have heard of. And so far, I think that we are functioning like we're giving them more value than we're giving to crypto companies. because crypto companies at the moment rely, by crypto companies I mean news websites and etc. They really rely a lot on direct deals, and if you're doing direct deals, then we cannot offer you anything because we're a programmatic solution. Meanwhile, in these other industries that we are approaching, they are almost entirely based on programmatic, so we can really come in handy there. We sort of, I wouldn't say made a mistake, but we went too much into crypto when we should actually be looking for the right fit in terms of where we provide the most value.
You mentioned streaming sites. Do you have your sites on any other industry that might, like TV or what's your ideal customer?
Yeah, actually, we're looking to try. So first of all, the adult industry, and then betting and gaming. And the reason is that those industries are using programmatic a lot, but usually they're getting kicked out of Google and kicked out of Facebook ads. Obviously, you cannot promote adult products on Facebook. So we're looking for those industries because they really don't have access to the top solutions.
Yeah, that'd be a really good place to expand, and I'm sure you guys will learn quite a lot. It's a huge part of the internet,
Yeah, exactly.
Is it true that you're only 25 years old?
Oh yeah.
Wow, man, that's impressive. And what part of the
Bulgaria, which is Eastern Europe.
Okay, Bulgaria. Yeah, cool, man. We've never really had anyone from Bulgaria on the show before, and
oh, cool.
I was just curious what the blockchain scene is like there in Bulgaria. Is there many blockchain companies or meetups?
You can say so. There is a meetup every week. It used to be like 10 people 5 years ago or 4 years ago, and then it grew rapidly through 2017, as you might imagine. And right now, I think hundreds of people are going to those meetups. There is a few companies here. The most notable one, I would say, is Eternity. I guess you might have heard of it. It's in top 100 on CoinMarketCap. It's a new chain, alternative of Ethereum. And they are based in Germany, but most of their operations are here.
That's really great. I know that you know a little bit about user experience, and user experience design is probably something that's going to help people adopt the blockchain on a massive scale. When you're doing your work and when you're meeting new people, how important is user experience compared to engineering at this point?
Also, another great question. So, user experience is extremely important, but engineering might make or break your user experience, especially in blockchain. And what I mean by that is, for example, when you're building something on Ethereum, if your smart contracts and if your base layer is poorly designed, then this is going to translate to bad UX. A great example of that is like when you're sending a token to a smart contract, you need to approve the transfer first, and then you need to send the transfer, and you have to sign two separate transactions. And this is leading to a lot of user confusion because, for example, you want to do something, the MetaMask pop-up pops up, you click on approve, and then another pop-up pops up, and you have no idea whether you actually did it or not. So this is what I mean. If you screw up the engineering, then you might have a very tough time doing good UX.
Yeah, that's very well said. We talk a lot about the state of adoption, of building Web 3.0, as some people call it. Talk to a lot of startups here, but there used to be a lot of hype around, blockchain, so hot right now kind of talk. I'm not sure I'm saying this right. I'm not familiar with this term, but DeFi, DEFI. Could you explain that to our audience?
So that's a very interesting point. It stands for decentralized finance, and what it is it's usually used to describe a lot of products on Ethereum, which resemble traditional financial products such as derivatives or synthetic assets, and implements it in a way that supposedly more transparent and non-custodial. And there are some products which do that really well. For example, Uniswap. Uniswap is an exchange on Ethereum, and it's one of the first decentralized exchanges with good UX. And there are others which are like more arguable in terms of how good they actually are compared to the centralized counterparts. But in general, it's a solid movement. It's picking up speed.
Finance is probably the most popular topic whenever we talk about blockchain, but I really like to talk about the other aspects of technology that blockchain can disrupt. And advertising seems like a very obvious space that is just really ready for disruption. And I'm glad that we were able to talk to you today. Can you update us a little bit about what you've been working on since the beta testing and just kind of where you're at with the company and where you see yourself in the next year?
So far, we have been in a private beta, which means that we have to invite you for you to register. And the next step is opening registrations for everyone, which is going to happen any moment now. I can't give you an exact date, but it's really, really close. We're really excited about this. And the main challenge behind this is UX. We have to ensure that our platform is as usable as possible. And what we have been working on is a system where you could sign up without having any blockchain knowledge. And this is done without us being a custodian. And this works by something called counterfactual accounts or counterfactual smart contracts, which means that you can do something on the blockchain. You can pre-compute the address of a smart contract. Then once you receive funds on this smart contract, then the smart contract is going to get deployed, and a transaction is going to get executed. And the reason this is important is that we are using smart contracts for each user account, because this allows us to remove network fees. This allows us to enable a mechanism which the fees are being paid in DAI. So a user only needs to care about DAI. They don't need to have Ether. They don't need to install MetaMask. They don't need to be familiar with blockchain terms. The only thing they need to know is that they're opening an account. This doesn't cost anything. They have an address which could be replaced by a user readable username. And once they receive funds on this account, once they top it up, which you can do with fiat, by the way, then everything happens in the background. The account gets created, the transaction gets sent, and from there they can interact with the platform without actually knowing that there is a blockchain underneath, and they pay the fees in the only thing they know, DAI.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Something I was thinking about earlier was advertising on podcasts, because I know that there's hundreds of millions of people that download podcasts each year. Do you see AdEx as something that could kind of get into that market share of advertising, or is it kind of too soon to get into the podcast advertising world?
I'm actually not sure, because if it's like a display ad on your website, then it can work. Obviously, you can use AdEx for that right now, but as for advertisements in the podcasts themselves, then this is usually a direct market, and we are focused on programmatic.
Gotcha. Yeah, and that's also an industry that's changing quickly, so it'll be interesting to see how that does change over the years. I know lots of people monetize podcasts in different ways. What about subscription type services where people subscribe directly to a website? And I know some offer advertising for a reduced subscription rate. Would that be kind of more along the lines that you could work with?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. As I mentioned earlier, there is this possibility for users to outbid advertisers. and this happens transparently. The user doesn't need to know about it. The user just top up their account and they see less ads. And the same could be applied for subscription websites. For example, you pay a subscription, you see less ads or no ads at all. So yeah, this is definitely something we can help with.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for explaining that a little bit more. I appreciate you coming and talking to me about this. I know that the audience will appreciate it as well. You know, it's a complicated space. After doing the show for over 3 years, I learned something new when I talk to each guest. This has been really good talking to you so far. I wanted to just give you the opportunity to kind of have the floor, talk about whatever you like.
I would just like to add something regarding the previous one of the previous questions, because I didn't answer it entirely. So what are our plans for the next year? Basically, our plan for the next year is to reach the mainstream in a way. For the moment, we have 20 or 30 publishers and advertisers, and we want to onboard hundreds, if not thousands, during the next year, and find our proper product market fit, find the proper industry which will benefit the most from our solution, because we already know from the publishers and advertisers that we have, we already know that we're giving them value. So that's pretty much the plan. Streamline the product as much as possible and find its best market. And if anyone listening is interested in either earning more from their website or spending their money more efficiently, if they're advertising, then they should reach out.
Great. Yeah. And where can people go to reach out and to learn more?
It's adx.network. I hope that you can link that in the description.
Yeah, definitely. I'll put that down there in the show notes or on the website as well.
Yeah, cool. Great.
Cool. Ivo, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been a real pleasure talking to you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me. And it was enjoyable.
Awesome, man. I appreciate that. I wish you guys all the best of luck in the future, and we'll be following you with much interest.
Thank you.
My guest today was Ivo Georgiev, the CEO of AdEx Network. AdEx is one of the first and most promising adtech blockchain startups like Brave, and the first one to deliver a functioning decentralized market for display ads. So there it is, folks, a little bit about advertising and the blockchain. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thanks also to all the emails over the past month. We've been getting some really good guests, and I hope that we can keep up with this momentum. If you know anyone who would make a good guest, a blockchain expert, or a real crypto enthusiast who could add something of value to this podcast, please reach out at info@theblockchainshow.com. I know we haven't had artwork for a while. Our artist is a little bit too expensive for me, so hopefully we'll have her back in the near future once we start getting some advertisers of our own. Just kind of keep it low-key for now. Hope that's all right with everybody. You know, it's just kind of minimal right now. Don't even have another co-host at the moment. If you'd be so kind to give us a kind rating or review, especially on Apple Podcasts, that would really help out. And I wish you all a good February, and be sure to tune in weekly as we'll have a lot of exciting and new guests this month. Thank you all very much. Goodbye.